Пані та панове, мене звати Данило Лубківський, і я радий вітати вас від імені Київського безпекового форуму. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Danilo Lubkivsky, and I'm happy and I'm pleased to welcome you on behalf of the Kyiv Security Forum. Today, we have a special discussion. Eastern Europe is in focus, but the very special Eastern Europe. That one which is not still protected by the European Union and NATO membership. Unlike the West, Russia has a comprehensive vision of our region and its importance. More importantly, Russia is ready and willing to invest everything it can to get this region back under its control. Whether in Belarus, Georgia, Moldova, or Ukraine, Moscow seeks to establish effective control to expand its influence westwards. How to protect the grassroots European belonging of our nations? How to join our pro-European forces across the borders within the region? How to deter any attempts to get us back to Russia's past? What should Ukraine do? And what can the West do more? These are the questions that we are going to discuss today, and I'm happy to introduce our distinguished panelists. Before I introduce them, let me say that our discussion will be held against the background of two important stories. Last Sunday, pro-European leader Maia Sandu won Moldova's presidential election. And we congratulate her on behalf of the Kyiv Security Forum and from many Ukrainians across the country. And we congratulate her team on this landslide victory. Another story is less positive, but extremely important as well. For 3 months now, Belarus has been fighting for its rights and freedoms. And this extraordinary uprising deserves not only deep respect, but active solidarity throughout Europe. For such a talk, the Kyiv Security Forum has gathered the distinguished panelists I mentioned, and this is my pleasure to introduce them. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Mikhail Popshoy, Deputy Speaker of the Parliament of Moldova, for joining us. Oksana Siroyid, Vice Speaker of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine in 2014 and 19, and the co-chairwoman of the Lviv Security Forum. I thank you, Oksana, for being with us. Alina Polyakova, the President of the Center for European Policy Analysis from the United States, SIPA. I'm really happy, Alina, that you did it and you joined us. Thank you. And Arseniy Yatsenyuk, former chairman of Ukraine's Verkhovna Rada in 2007 and 8, Prime Minister of Ukraine in 2014 and 16, and the chairman of the Kyiv Security Forum. I thank you, Mr. Yatsenyuk, for being with us all along this interesting way of our discussions. So I would like to invite Mr. Yatsenyuk to start our discussion and to answer the basic question. Our region deserves more attention from the West, doesn't it? Why it is important for the West not to lose its interest in this part of Europe? The floor is yours.
Well, that's an existential thing for the West to have Moldova, Ukraine, and Georgia as the part of the European Union and NATO. And let me start with the congratulations of the people of Moldova with the landslide victory of Maia Sandu. You know, it's fair and square that it's not only Maia Sandu who is the president-elect and who won these very complicated elections. This is the people of Moldova and people of the European Union and the free world who actually won these elections. Who lost? We know the name, and it's not Mr. Dodon. His name is President Putin, because he personally endorsed his pro-Russian president on the sovereign soil of Moldova. And actually, this is a perfect sign of a vibrant democracy in Moldova. No doubt that the president-elect and the Moldovan people will face a number of challenges. And frankly speaking, we have a lot in common between Ukraine and Moldova. Russian troops are stationed on the sovereign soil of Moldova in Transnistria. Russian troops stationed in Crimea, Donetsk, and Lugansk. But Russia tries to undermine both territorial integrity and democracy in our countries. We are facing huge challenges of pandemic, COVID, economy, and the problem is a huge migration in our countries, and we have to cope with this. Let me first comment a very vocal and articulate language of and statement of President-elect when she actually condemned an illegal annexation of Crimea and condemned the Russian aggression against Ukraine. And that's another example of our mutual problems, and we need to find our mutual ways how to fix these problems. It is important for both of us to have a kind of joint action plan, how to make our nations prosperous. In my humble opinion, I believe that you in Moldova will need to reset your entire political system, and you will need, maybe, it's up to you to decide whether you will have a snap parliamentary elections in order to support the president-elect with the pro-European and strong political forces in the House, in the parliament. So you have to lead by an example, as we did in 2014. And Ukraine is the best friend of Moldova. And I strongly believe that Ukrainian government and Ukrainian administration have to support Moldova and vice versa. But the thing is that what Danilo just asked me about the European Union. A few months ago, I published an article in FT asking the European states and the United States to establish a kind of high-level task force. A task force how to make Europe better and bigger. And the key focus of this task force is to be on Moldova, Ukraine, and Georgia. Whether Moldova, Georgia, and Ukraine can become the members of the European Union and NATO. And the answer is to be positive, no doubt. So we need to have a kind of action plan and roadmap. It is to be a bumpy road, no doubt, but we need to reach the target. People of Moldova, people of Ukraine, and people of Georgia, in order to establish a kind of belt of democracy, freedom belt, in Europe, and to enlarge the free Europe and to make Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia members of the European Union. And please, do not forget about Belarus. Putin is trying to control the Belarus, and people of Belarus are fighting. And it's up to Europeans too and Americans to support not an uprising, but the fight for freedom in Belarus. So my congratulations with your elections.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. And now I turn to Mr. Speaker Popshoy. Again, please accept our sincere congratulations. But the political reality, what I understand, might not give you, your political party, much time to celebrate. So, in your opinion, what should be next? To implement her political goals, President Sandu would need to gain powers. However, there are only 15 deputies of your party, of the Action and Solidarity Party in your parliament, which includes 101 members. So what's the plan, Mr. Speaker? What are your priorities? And in your opinion, how do you think you can achieve them? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, first of all the kind words and for the congratulations. On behalf of Maya Sandu, I'd like to pass on a sincere thank you. Also, I'd like to thank you for your kind invitation to speak on this highly esteemed forum. As pertains to your question, indeed, the situation is not easy. We might have won a battle, but the war is still ahead. You are, I'm sure, aware that the prerogatives of the Moldovan president are quite limited by the constitution. So in order for Maya Sandu to be able to implement her truly historic mandate that she was given by the voters, by the citizens of Moldova last Sunday, she needs a partner in parliament and in government. She needs a majority that is in sync with the agenda that she put forward in the Sunday election. And for that, there is definitely an urgent need for snap parliamentary elections, because this current parliament is discredited, and that is an understatement. The parliament itself lacks legitimacy from inception, because it is a result of a highly controversial change of the electoral system between Plahotniuc and Dodon back in the day. And then afterwards, during this legislature, these 2 years, almost a third, if not more, of members of parliament have switched sides, switched parties, some of them even twice, with credible allegations of corruptions hanging above their heads. So not only is this parliament not representative, it is also largely illegitimate. So it does need to be dissolved so that the citizens can vote and have a parliament that is representative. And hopefully after snap elections, we're going to have a government that will work hand in hand with the President Sandu and transport into life all those agenda items. First and foremost, fight against corruption and building resilient independent institutions in Moldova. And then, of course, stemming from that, once you are able to have progress in that area, you can comfortably expect further investment that will create jobs, that will help the economy grow salaries and pensions. And of course, from a foreign policy perspective, European integration is the core, the foundation of our electoral platform, is part of our political DNA. And we look forward to cooperating with our partners, Ukraine, Georgia, and others in the Eastern Partnership, and also on a bilateral level, in order to learn the best practices in terms of harmonizing legislation, but also have the synergetic effect in order to advocate together our joint interests of joining the European Union. And having snap elections may not be easy, because we indeed have only 15 members of parliament, but by virtue of having this enormous landslide victory, this truly historic mandate, Maia Sandu received the highest number of votes in Moldovan history, even more votes than President Luchinsky in 1996, when Moldova had about a third more citizens living in the country. So we are going to use legal means, but we're also going to use public pressure. And if need be, we can also call on our supporters to put pressure on Parliament to make sure that this current Parliament listens to the people and dissolves in order to have snap elections, so that voters have a Parliament and a government that is representative of their interests.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you very much. I need to tell the Ukrainian audience that Moldova's success is extremely important for our own security and national interests as well, and for Europe in general. Moldova is important for Ukraine, not only because Moldova is our good friend and neighbor, but because our freedom and our future successes are what I call interdependent, mutually dependent. The same goes and the same relates to Belarus. Those our partners and neighbors who strive for their freedoms, dignity, and the European perspective. We cannot do it alone. We have to do it together with our partners who aspire to membership in the European Union and NATO. But Mr. Speaker, if I may, since here you see those who started their political actions in 2014 with many ambitions, with many ideas, and met the very difficult political reality in Ukraine. And for that, I would like to clarify only one issue. On your difficult road, which is ahead of you, you may find a need to find some, I would say, unexpected compromises and alliances. For instance, for Ukraine's audience, it would be very interesting to hear about the perspectives of your further cooperation with such political figures as Renato Usatый and those who seem to be, I would say, those partners that supported a new course of Moldova, but can, as experts say, can bring about some kind of unexpected further political, can do some unexpected political steps. So do you see the danger of difficult compromises before you? And how do you think you can curb the danger of those alliances that may somehow appear or not? The floor is yours.
Indeed. During our relatively short political history as a party, because our party is only about 5 years old, or actually 4 years old, we have been fortunate to not have been in a position to ever compromise on our core principles. We have made political sacrifices when we've entered a coalition with the socialists to get rid of Plahotniuc. That coalition was justified, even though we have paid dearly politically for some time in the election in Chisinau, for instance, in the capital. But that coalition was justified. And we have not compromised our principles, because when we engaged in real, meaningful justice reform, we have seen that our then temporary partners, socialists, backed down and backstabbed us, and that was the end of it. We learned from that experience. You mentioned Renato Usate. He has yet to make it into parliament. It is up to the Moldovan voters to decide how the composition of parliament is going to look like. We are going to work with what we are given by the voters. It's not going to be an ideal scenario, although we would like it to be that we gain a majority and we don't need to enter into a coalition with anyone. That would be an ideal scenario. That is probably unlikely, although I must admit, just 2 weeks ago, I said that it was unlikely that 300,000 Moldovan diaspora would turn out and vote, and almost 300,000 actually turned up. There was about 275, when in the first round, there was only 150,000. So I should not underestimate the capacity of the Moldovan voters to make the right choice. But I'm confident that whoever Moldovan voters elect into parliament, we are going to be able to form a coalition that is based on the principles and the agenda that Maia Sandu proposed and that was wholeheartedly endorsed by the Moldovan voters. And by no means we're going to compromise on any of our key principles and ideas. There is no compromise on European integration. There is absolutely no compromise on justice reform. There is absolutely no compromise on stable and a partnership based on mutual respect with all of our neighbors. And there can be no compromise on having good governance reforms introduced across all sectors to get rid of the remnants of the state capture that we've been struggling for many, many years. So by virtue of Maia Sandu enjoying this very powerful mandate, I don't see us ever being in a position to compromise those key principles that have made us and have made Maia Sandu so successful.
Wonderful. That's a good answer, and I would like to thank you for the clarity of the message that you sent. I believe, I have no doubts that this clarity would be well heard, not only in Kyiv, not only in Ukraine, but in the West and also in the Kremlin. So thank you for this position, and thank you for the stance. And now I turn to Dr. Alina Polyakova. Mrs. President, Madam President, I'm really happy that you are with us, and I'm happy that SIPA joins the club of the Kyiv Security Forum. So we are excited, and we look very much forward to our future cooperation as well. So right now, I'm going to ask you about how the Moldova story, the story of our region, looks from the United States perspective. There are three things in common for every nation in our part of Europe. We need stronger internal resilience, meaning national identity and rule of law building. we need stronger protection against Russia's existential threat, and we need stronger Western involvement, meaning the European Union and NATO membership. So how the region looks from US perspective when President-elect Biden and his team get prepared for the presidency, and can we anticipate what you feel? Can we anticipate, or can we somehow encourage any kind of breakthrough in terms of our region? You're welcome.
Well, thank you, Danilo, and this is a fantastic conversation. And again, I just want to add my congratulations to the people of Moldova and to you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It was incredibly exciting to watch the landslide victory of Maya Sandu this past weekend, who's been a friend to many of us in Washington as well, and look forward to seeing the path forward that you just described take place. And very much I'm rooting for you, all of us here in Washington are. Danilo, you alluded to the reality that we just had our own elections in the United States that were historic in their own right. It's quite rare that we have an incumbent president who loses a re-election. Obviously, there's still a debate going on here in the United States about the results of the election. But there's no doubt that certainly President-elect Biden and his running mate, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, will enter the White House on January 20th, Inauguration Day, despite President Trump's current lack of concession to the reality of the election. I think that being said, there's some good news and perhaps some bad news when it comes to the future of U.S. policy towards the region. I think the good news, of course, is that we know that President-to-be Biden has been very involved and very passionate about the region. Certainly, Ukraine was part of his portfolio when he was vice president during the Obama administration. And we know what he really cares about. And those are all the issues that have already been mentioned here, which is first and foremost rooting out corruption in the system when it comes to Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, and certainly Belarus remains to be seen. I think what's incredibly exciting is that the region, I think, will receive a huge amount of attention from the Biden administration and the people around the president. We know some of the top contenders for high-level positions. We know that they are probably the most Atlanticist team, and certainly President-elect Biden is probably the most Atlanticist president that we've seen in quite some time in the U.S. So certainly there will be a great amount of attention paid to the region and to Europe more broadly. But I think the bad news, of course, is that when we look at all of the priorities that the Biden team will have, not just on foreign policy or first and foremost on domestic policy, it is going to be difficult to make a case for why the administration should focus on the Eastern Partnership, should continue to focus on the countries that we're talking about here today, given the slew of other first and foremost domestic priorities, and second of all, the kind of foreign policy priorities we know will be top of the agenda, that of course being China, climate change, and democracy promotion. So I think the potentially bad news is going to be very hard to be on the agenda of the new administration. That being said, I think there is a great deal that the Eastern Partnership countries, or I mean, like that term very much. I love the idea of a freedom belt, present a common front for how the U.S. should engage. We talked about NATO engagement, NATO presence, establishing a path forward for EU membership, for Ukraine, for Georgia, for Moldova, and for Belarus, hopefully. But I think the U.S. has to also lead in this effort. And the U.S. absolutely has to be present. I think for the last 4 years, we've seen a U.S. that's been a bit chaotic on foreign policy, to say the least. That is about to change. But I think it is very much up to you, those of you in power, the former positions of power, to make the case to this administration, to engage early on, and to the extent possible to present a common front. I can't stress that enough, and how critical I think that will be for getting attention to the region. I think the desire is there. There is an open door, but it's very much, I think, up to Ukraine. It is up to Moldova, depending on what happens in Belarus. and of course, Georgia, to make the case why US leadership and US presence is so critical, not just for the region, not just for Eastern Europe, but for Europe and the transatlantic relationship, and of course, for continuing to deter Russian aggression across the West.
I thank you. I like this idea about freedom belt. And I'm happy that you speak for one voice with Prime Minister Yatsenyuk, who also mentioned the idea of having all these nations together on their way to European Union and NATO. And here I turn to Madam Speaker Syroyet. Dear Oksana, first of all, let me commend your efforts as the chairwoman of the Lviv Security Forum. I have already said this, that this discussion is important not only as we discuss very important matters, but also because the Lviv Security Forum joins the efforts of the Kyiv Security Forum. And for that, it's a good sign and a good event. So, dear Oksana, if I may, I would be grateful to hear the conclusions of, and we all would be grateful to hear the conclusions of the latest gathering of the Lviv Security Forum, since you discussed the matters of Ukraine's regional activities. So why do you think it is important for Ukraine to perform actively in regional affairs? And what are the principles, in your opinion, we should promote in our part of Europe? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear Danilo. It's really a pleasure for me and an honor really to join the Kyiv Security Forum and to combine other efforts. And I believe that this is the beginning of fruitful cooperation that we can build on this between our two platforms. I do join all the congratulations that has been addressed to Maya Sandu and Moldova, people of Moldova, because I'm happy for Maya Sandu, but also because I do understand that this is the very important step to change the balance of power in Europe. And coming back to the Lviv Security Forum, I think that the conclusions of the most recent discussion, they very much echoes of what is discussed here. And here I would like to emphasize a few things exactly to complement the discussion, because a lot of very important things have been already said. But I would like to emphasize that the major target of Russia hasn't been changed through the last 350 years, and this is the control over the Baltic and Black Sea region. And this target has been always in the first sight of any of Russian leaders. Doesn't matter what kind of construction, legal or political construction they represent. So during the Security Forum, we are trying to understand the strategies and to look for the counter-actions, for the solutions that can be considered. This year, we devoted our major time to Black Sea region. And we do believe this is of great importance because this is actually, if I may say so, this is an alternative to Minsk, because everybody is asking, what is an alternative to Minsk? Black Sea cooperation this is the alternative to Minsk. What I mean? I mean that Russia is struggling for the control over the Black Sea region because this is important due to Russian colonization of Africa and due to their interest in the Middle East. And they need to control all the trade and security routes in the Black Sea, in the East Mediterranean, and actually around this area. And that was the major reason to invade Crimea. That's why what Russia is doing now, Russia is trying to put all the efforts to prevent the countries of this region, of the Black Sea region, to cooperate. That's why to contain Russia in this region, what we have to do, we have to establish cooperation and to act really like to be proactive, not reactive in the region that is what's happening now. And the conclusions of Lviv Security Forum in this regard was that the cooperation between the countries of the Black Sea region should be in the area of access to the resources and common commercial projects, including access to critical infrastructure. It should be the security of trade and security routes in the Black Sea. It should be permanent training, military trainings in the region with a lot of movements of a lot of weapons and a lot of soldiers across the region. It should be, of course, the separate attention brought to the role of Turkey and the presence of American and German ships in Black Sea, and maybe asymmetrical, but which is very important. I believe here the efforts of Moldova also would be very important to work together to claim international responsibility for all crimes that Russia committed in the region, including Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, Syria, all over the region. And we believe that in those areas, first we have the ground for cooperation and we can be successful. So, but this, I believe, we have the good scope of work to do. And the idea is where we can build the cooperation between the countries and where we can build additional efforts inside of Ukraine as well.
I do thank you. And most importantly, that these ideas are heard in Brussels and other European capitals. So, and for that, the Kyiv Security Forum creates this platform to voice what is practically, politically, geopolitically needed for this part of Europe and for Europe in general. And now let me turn again to Mr. Speaker Popshoy. You know, it is very important for us to develop right now to I would say to speed up our bilateral dialogue between Ukraine and Moldova. That's a good sign that there was the first contact between two presidents. For what we understand, that there would be some thinking how to establish a result-oriented agenda of our bilateral relationship. Mr. Speaker, what do you think? How Ukraine can help Moldova? And what do you expect from the official Kyiv and what the Ukrainian society, and this is extremely important, Ukrainian civil activists, Ukrainian civil society can do for your country and for our bilateral relationship? The floor is yours.
Thank you. First of all, I must say that we're incredibly thankful to President Zelensky. He was among the first, if not the first, to reach out to President Alexander. And they have built quite a strong relationship during their first meeting when Maya Sandu was Prime Minister. And we look forward to bolstering this partnership in the interests of both people. And I myself remember last year I visited, and I was on a visit and met with Deputy Speaker Stefanchuk and people from senior officials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Our agenda items, our interests align on a lot of issues, a lot of regional issues. But the main priority for us is cooperation with Kyiv, with Ukraine, on our joint European agenda. How we can synchronize our efforts, how we can work together to advance our common interests in Brussels, so that we have a higher chance of advancing from the current association agreements, which we are all under implementation. But I'm quite confident, based on my discussions with colleagues from Kyiv, but also Tbilisi, that we are all craving for a more advanced stage of a relationship with Brussels. But for that, we need to cooperate closely in terms of how we implement association agreement, how we implement reforms, even outside the scope of the association agreement, reforms in anti-corruption, reforms of building resilient institutions, so that we go above and beyond in the reform process, so that we have a higher chance of, once we feel that we are ready, to send the membership perspective, so that membership application, so that application is actually accepted. There are, of course, issues on the bilateral agenda of economic cooperation, energy cooperation, climate, people-to-people contacts, media, culture, civil society. But then, of course, the elephant in the room, the Transnistrian conflict is there. This is quite a serious vulnerability, not just for Moldova, but also Ukraine. And Ukraine has a tremendous role to play in hoping bring this conflict to a settlement, to a political settlement. And we count on our partners in Kiev to do just that, to find a resolution of the conflict that is in the interest of the Moldovan people, but that also doesn't pose any threat to Ukraine. I'm confident that by virtue of the partnership that we have, the good relations that we have, we can overcome the shortcomings and the deficit that has been built in our relationship for the last few years, because I must admit it was rather unfortunate to not have high-level ties, high-level meetings, and indeed to have the relationship in some ways almost frozen for 4 years, for obvious reasons, of course, but that is just unfortunate for the Moldovan people, and that is also not the right thing for Ukraine. We hope we can overcome and we can reach a new level of relations that reflect the interests of Moldovan people and of the people of Ukraine.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I wish you very good luck. And I hope that the current leadership of Ukraine fully understands the strategic importance of our relationship, our good relationship with Moldova, and of making everything possible to assist your country and to stay strong and united on our way toward the further European perspective. And now I would like to ask you to turn to the matters related to the dramatic situation in Belarus and to our Belarus partners and friends. And my next question goes to Dr. Alina Polyakova. Dear Alina, what we see in Belarus is, in my opinion, is unprecedented example of peaceful, almost unbelievable in its peacefulness and consistency, protest and demand for human rights and dignity. In your opinion, what should we all do to support Belarus, meaning the West, Ukraine, and Belarus' Western neighbors? You're welcome.
Thank you, Danilo. I think what's happening in Belarus highlights that there is no such thing as people living happily in an authoritarian regime. And in many ways, Belarus has for many years remained the unfinished business of 1989, when we've seen countries across the region move towards a more democratic governance. And Belarus, of course, has remained in the past, so to say, with Lukashenko's increasing grip on society. I think the unfortunate reality is that the situation remains incredibly fluid. And Lukashenko, because of the support from Russia and the Kremlin, because of the pervasive nature of the security services, I think the government has been incredibly effective at repressing and suppressing the protests and harassing individual pro-democracy activists, forcing all kinds of likely false confessions under duress, under blackmail, etc. And that is weakening the opposition. Of course, the reality that most opposition leaders are now either in exile or have been arrested, have been harassed and fear for their lives is very, very serious. I think with the new US administration coming in January, it should be absolutely a top priority to support the pro-democracy activists of Belarus, to give them our diplomatic support first and foremost, to make it very clear that the United States supports pro-democracy movements across the world, but certainly in places where people are fighting peacefully, first and foremost, for their political rights, for their human rights, and for their economic rights. I think it's unfortunately very little that the EU has been able to do and has done. At the end of the day, Belarus is a country in Europe, just like Ukraine, just like Moldova, just like Georgia. And it should be up to the EU to, on the one hand, sanction the Belarusian authorities for their violations of human rights, while on the other hand, supporting the Belarusian pro-democracy activists. I think the EU sanctions have been far too weak. What we've seen so far, it's been a good thing, certainly, in a show of European unity, but it certainly hasn't changed the dynamics on the ground. And I think without a stronger message that the EU and then the United States has support for Belarusian pro-democracy activists, I fear that Lukashenko will remain in power for the foreseeable future, and that the people of Belarus will not see their freedoms anytime soon. My other fear, of course, is that when we have a switch in the administration in the United States, that it may already be too late to change the reality on the ground. But I think certainly greater cooperation across pro-democracy movements in the region, I think would be incredibly valuable. Supporting from a diplomatic point of view the demands and desires of the people of Belarus first and foremost, and on the other hand, advocating for greater punishment through sanctions and other mechanisms by the European Union would be key. It's something that we're all watching very, very closely. It's been an incredibly inspiring story, but at the same time, I think once again the West finds itself disjointed without a coherent policy. And that is a movie we've seen before, and it hasn't ended well in other places.
I thank you. This is the demand that we also share, and this demand we address to the Ukrainian authorities as well. That Ukrainian officials, the official Kyiv, should do more and be more proactive in supporting Belarus civil society, in defending the rights of people and defending them against the oppression of Lukashenko regime. And Ukraine has necessary leverage to do that. So official Kyiv should not be silent or should not be, I would say, hesitant in the efforts to support the same values as we share in Ukraine, in Moldova, in Georgia, in all those nations that are on the way to the European standards and rule of law and just normal human being, human life. And now I turn to Madam Speaker Oksana Syroid. There is yet another elephant in the room. In fact, Russia is the only beneficiary of the Lukashenko oppression against his own nation in Belarus. Russia continues to provoke political instability and uncertainty in Moldova, in Ukraine. It continues to do that in Belarus. The same actually person, Dmitry Kozak from Putin's inner circle, stands behind the notorious Russia's plans to paralyze both Ukraine and Moldova, known as Kozak's plan for Transnistria and his current exercises in Donbass. So Russia has a comprehensive vision and understanding of its interests in the region. And Russia is able and willing to implement that vision. Don't you find that our response, of our countries, of Ukraine, together with the West, should also be more comprehensive and more united? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's really a big and good question. And here, first of all, I want to emphasize once again, the objective with Russia, it hasn't been changed for 350 years to control over the Black and Baltic Sea. So it's all the puzzles of the same picture. And those who believe that they can, sacrifice Belarus and kind of contain Russia with this victim, I have to upset very much those people, because they are just encouraging Russia to enter into the Baltic Sea. And to the Suwalki, those who know, they know that Suwalki corridor is one of the most sensitive points of NATO and of the trade in Eastern and Northern Europe. So here I would echo Alina very much, and I would say that we should stop speaking about Eastern Partnership. Eastern Partnership actually it's the exclusive concept, not an inclusive concept. Because here, with this concept of Eastern Partnership, a lot of European politicians and European elites, they are pretending that they are looking for a special solution for those countries. There is no special solution for this country. There should be exactly establish this, as Alina mentioned it, and I like it very much, the freedom belt that goes from Baltic to the Black Sea. And here, Moldova, Ukraine, and Georgia cannot build a separate resilience. The resilience shall be built common between all the countries of Central and Eastern Europe. This is the second point. And the third point, exactly, Russia will be exploiting different kind of instruments. And in Belarus, since they have good relationships with the dictator, they are just watching and supporting the dictatorship actions. In those countries where they didn't have this support, they were trying to act with the invasion. This is what they did in the late 80s, beginning of 90s with Moldova, then later on in Ukraine. And you are right, Danilo, that actually the Cossacks plan for Moldova, it was the predecessor of the Minsk in Ukraine. It is the same. If you compare the Cossacks plan and the Minsk, they have very similar wording. And I can tell you even more, that those two plans, they are just a successor of the plan of Stalin that has been offered to Konrad Adenauer in 1952. So Russia has never changed its method or its plans or methods. And at that time, in the mid of 20th century, Russia has been offering the same conditions to unite Germany, and they now offer Moldova and Ukraine to unite Moldova and Ukraine. And at that time, Konrad Adenauer told Stalin that our unity is possible only in freedom. We cannot prefer unity before freedom. So if we answer our European partners, we have to tell them that we are following German plans. We are following German scenario. We will do what you taught us to do, how to reply to Russia if you want to survive. And the last point here, that I do agree that we have to do our homework and do our best efforts. I mean, Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, to build the rule of law and to establish the democratic institutions. But at the same time, it's also the home task for the Europe as well, for the European Union, because the institutions of European Union, they are, they're serving like a service hub to Russian money, to the money of Ukrainian oligarchs, to the money of Moldovan oligarchs, Russia-backed oligarchs, not just rich people, but those who are implementing Russian interests in other countries. So it's very difficult to expect that Ukrainian society and Ukrainian democratic movement in our or Moldovan society and pro-democracy movement, that they will be able to do it themselves, while European institutions will be still backing all those Russian and pro-Russian efforts. So if we are honest, and if we are truly interested to build this a common resilience and to build this freedom belt. Let's unite the efforts. Let's forget of the exclusion, and let's, build the rule of law together. And then we will we'll build the resilience against Russian invasion. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful, Oksana. I thank you very much for this message. Actually, our discussion is a message itself. This message is sent to the West. It's being sent to Brussels and to the European capitals. Please do not underestimate the threat which comes these days from the Russian policy and from the Kremlin, since you would immediately feel the consequences of that threat and the danger it exposes to our countries. What personally I believe in is that I feel that there is a strong need for further efforts to unite the pro-European forces across our region, political parties, civil activists, to respond to the threats we face, both internal and external. Mr. Prime Minister Yatsenyuk, I would like to invite you for the concluding remarks. And don't you find that there is a need to unite our efforts across the borders? The floor is yours.
Here is the thing. I was thinking how to wrap up. And let me be more informal and let me be very blunt. Mr. Deputy Speaker, first of all, we wish you all the best. And, complacency is not the best time right now. You guys are facing tremendous challenges. And I, as a political animal, once wearing rosy glasses, can share with you my experience as a 2 times Prime Minister. So you made a great job winning the office of the President of the Republic. But it's important for you and for us to have in place a very strong government. You mentioned the snap parliamentary elections. We had a number of snap parliamentary elections in my country. And in 2014, I won snap parliamentary elections. But in 2019, we had another snap parliamentary elections called by President Zelensky. They were unconstitutionally called. So it's important for you to find an appropriate way how to fit to the demands of the constitution and how to fit to the demands of Moldovan people. Once you break the constitution, it's going to be a ticking bomb, So I'm not lecturing, don't think like that, but I'm just trying to share with you my political experience. So you need to have snap parliamentary elections, you need to have very strong government and very strong prime minister. Another problem, both the president and prime minister have to be on the same page. No daylight between the president and the prime minister, because I am well aware what this shitty power grab means in the republics like Moldova and Ukraine, okay? The third issue is that media. You are in a very toxic media environment right now. And please do not forget that you are not fighting with some kind of really independent journalists. No, Russians are doing their best to undermine your public support. They will buy politicians, as they did in Ukraine. They will buy media outlets. They will have hundreds of different bots. They will have this kind of machines of deception and dissemination of false information. The key idea for Russians and for your political, that's not opponents, but political enemies, to undermine the public trust that you gained with the president-elect and with, I hope, with the next government. So do not allow to switch from the freedom of speech to the freedom of deception. That's what happened in Ukraine. Could you imagine that 50% of the news channels in Ukraine controlled by Putin? 50%. And we can cope with this. So you need to regain the public trust. And that's very difficult stuff, how to talk to the people and how to pass the reforms. Because if you are on the way to the reforms, they are unpopular in the short run, but they are meaningful in the long run. In terms of European Union and United States, let me ask Honorable Alina Polyakova to do their best to send the message to Americans and to Europeans that it's great to have a number of meetings, to have a number of statements, but it's much better to have a clear-cut action plan. How Europeans and Americans will support you personally, your government, and your country. No kind of dubious and not always clear, I would say, steps. Very clear-cut action plan. In terms of Ukraine, you mentioned President Zelensky, and I hope that this administration and the foreign ministry and the Ukrainian parliament fully understand the necessity of some very strong dialogue with the Republic of Moldova and your president and your future government. We need to stand shoulder to shoulder because we fight for our countries, we fight for our people, and we fight against one of the strongest enemies, who is President Putin. And just trust me, Putin will never give up his plan to control Moldova, Ukraine, and Georgia. This is his ultimate goal, to restore the Soviet Union. And he is focused on Moldova, Ukraine, and Georgia. So the reason why I'm telling you, sir, because as far as I understand, you have the ear of the president. And let me reiterate once again, we are heavily interested in your success, because your success is our success, and both of us have to be successful.
I thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, would you like to respond to the intervention of Arseniy Yatsenyuk?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Indeed, your wealth of experience is incredibly valuable. And by no means do we rest on our laurels and do we have illusions about what is yet to come. We may be relatively new to the political stage, but we are well aware about the difficulties, the challenges, the threats, the vulnerabilities that are in our region. We are keenly aware about the experience of Ukraine. We are keenly aware about the experience of Georgia. But first and foremost, we are keenly and painfully aware about our own history and about our own experience. So by no means are we oblivious to these issues and concerns that you have pointed out. So we are going to engage with all our partners based on the interests and mutual respect. And as we discussed earlier, at no stage, under no circumstances, are we going to compromise on our key principles. That is European integration. That is unquestionably, unwaveringly our strategic vector, and nothing can change that. That is because overwhelmingly and increasingly, Moldovan citizens wholeheartedly support this vector of integration of foreign policy. Now we're getting back to where we were in 2009, 2008, to over 70% of support for European integration. Now we're in the high 60s. So we are confident that thanks to the support of the Moldovan people, thanks to the support of our partners and friends in the region, first and foremost, Romania and Ukraine, but also our partners in Europe, in Washington and elsewhere, we are going to build Moldovan institutions, and we are going to bring Moldova closer to Europe. And we count on our good friends and partners in Kiev to support us in this undertaking. Thank you.
I thank you. This is a strong and important message which comes these days from Moldova. And I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank you, your team and Madam President Sandu for delivering this message to Europe. The victory of Maya Sandu inspires. The people's uprising in Belarus calls to action. So let's all of us stay together and continue our efforts to promote the values we believe in. And I would like to thank you all for this interesting discussion. We highly appreciate your presence. And we, on behalf of the Kyiv Security Forum, let me underline that we look forward to continue our fruitful cooperation. Дуже дякую вам за участь, дякую за цікаві думки. Сподіваюся, наша аудиторія повною мірою усвідомлює важливість такої активної співпраці в нашому регіоні, в Європі і на євроатлантичному просторі задля успіху наших народів і задля стримування небезпечної російської агресії, яка стосується усіх. Дуже дякую.